right. Welcome to another chapter of Two Vollies and a Guest. This is our fourth podcast. Tonight we'll be talking about special event planning and specifically the threat assessment portion of that. There'll be two follow-on podcasts to this. There'll be the threat assessment we're going to talk about tonight. Part two will be developing your plan. And a third part, a very important part, is the after-action review to tweak your plan for the following year. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim Pillsworth, my co-host, to introduce our very special guest tonight.
Well, first of all, hopefully everyone had a great holiday season. Our guest is a good long-term friend from us, is Captain Christopher Flatley, retired from the FDNY Center, Terrorism and Disaster Preparedness, where he spent 15 years as an analyst involving in special event planning and response. He's produced threat assessments for some of the city's most high-profile events. He's a Master Exercise Practitioner, has conducted exercise to evaluate the preparedness for the FDNY and interagency partners across a wide array of scenarios. He's also been a volunteer fireman for a very long time and past chief in his department in Rockland County. And we like to call him Toph. Has been a long friend with us, writing with us and teaching with us. And we'll leave it up to you, Toph. It's all yours.
Well, thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to discuss special event planning. A lot of the smaller towns, municipalities, volunteer organizations don't have a lot of experience in special event planning because they just don't get involved in it. A lot of the times, the special event coordination is a law enforcement driven event. Law enforcement sometimes has an issue with consulting with the fire department or even EMS in the fact that they don't understand what we do, but they know that they need to call us when something terrible goes wrong. And it's one of those things where a little bit of heads up goes a long way when something terrible happens. So hopefully we can spark a little bit of thought and hopefully get engaged with the law enforcement or who's ever doing your emergency preparedness planning for special events within your community so that you can have a seat at the table and bring value added to the response to a horrible event in the event that it does happen.
So one of the things we'd like to impress upon you today is think like a bad guy. You have an event, let's say, we'll use the example of a 4th of July fireworks show in your town. Think like a bad guy. How could somebody kill people? How could somebody disrupt this? How could somebody make this a political statement for whatever cause they think? Could they drive a vehicle in? Again, think like a bad guy. Could they use a bomb? Could they use a chemical device? Could they do a mass shooting? Could they come in with a machete? Just kind of think about those things. Think like a bad guy. Don't get paranoid, but there's bad people out there. I'd also recommend you do this. You think you've been surveilled, right? So these bad guys have done their planning. They've if they're going to carry out an attack, there's 7 steps to that. They may have come and taken pictures. They may have drawn maps. So assume you've been surveilled. Clearly, you can't stop everything, but if we can slow the bad guys down, make them an opportunity to be a target by law enforcement, as Toph was just saying, I think that's a good start. We've had a number of, I Googled a list of events that have happened. 2017, the Vegas shooting, you've probably all heard of that, killed 60 people. In New Orleans, a truck ramming attack, which is getting more prevalent, killed 14 and 15 people, injured 50. The Christmas parade, again, a kind of a religious target in 2021 in Wisconsin, killed 6 people with vehicle ramming. Highland Park 4th of July parade shooting, July 4th, 2022, killed 7. So nobody's immune to this. So we'd encourage you to just do a little bit of planning. Your plan will get better every year. So let's kick this off and say we're going to have a fireworks show in your town. Large number of your townsfolk will be there, several thousand. Toph, how would you start the process for planning for that?
Well, you have to start with the venue itself. You have to look at the egress and ingress. How do you harden the perimeter? If you make it more difficult for people to get to your victims or potential victims, they may move on to a softer target. They may choose someplace other than your fireworks display to do whatever it is that they want to do. So assess your perimeter, figure out how you can harden it. You have to figure out also what the tolerance is of the population of the people that are going to be at your fireworks display. Are they going to put up with bag searches? Are you going to have pens, the bicycle racks that they use in New Year's Eve at times in Times Square? Are you going to create pens? Jerry, I know you're familiar with fireworks planning. What about egress and ingress routes? Well, I was involved with the Super Bowl in New York City, and we had created corridors for just for responders to come in and just for ambulances to leave. So you have to figure out the logistics of how you're going to coordinate this. Where are you going to put up your treatment triage areas? Things like that. So you have to take a look at the ground spec for the event that you're going to have. And as a basic rule, take a look at that and see where your vulnerabilities lie.
So in your threat analysis, you're really going to kind of pick the number of threats or a limited number of threats you think are likely. And what you'll find is if you plan for one, you've kind of planned for another. So for example, something's going to cause mass casualties. So if you've covered the EMS sector of it, and like Toph said, how do I get ambulances in? How do I get ambulances out? That covers a lot of bases. So the mitigations you do for some threats may cover all of them. Toph, can you talk a little bit about hardening the perimeter? We've been using at my fireworks show dump trucks just to prevent the vehicle ramming issue. Can you discuss that at some point?
Discussing hardening the perimeter. Parking dump trucks is great, and that can prevent a lot of issues with vehicle rammings and access and egress. The thing you have to look at also is that going to impede egress of the population at the end of the evening? If there is a problem, is the guy with the keys to the dump truck going to be standing next to the dump truck to move it when you need to have that area as a victim access point or egress point? Or is that part of your plan to bring in the ambulances or to drive out with the ambulances? Fire trucks are great. They show up and they stay. Ambulances pull in, have to pull out, so you can't block them in. Law enforcement vehicles, everybody's got all of these command posts and things like that. Special teams type units, they have to get in and do their work too. But you also have to put real estate on the map for where they're going to go, where they're going to park in the event of something else. So it doesn't prevent the well from leaving and only leave behind the casualties. So you really have to take a good hard look at how much real estate you have. Um, the other thing you want to do is actually figure out how big the square footage or acreage of your event space is going to be and determine exactly how many people you can have so you don't have overcrowding conditions. When NYPD sets up the bicycle racks in Times Square, they know exactly how many people each pen holds, and they don't put a single person more than that in those pens. The other problem you're going to have is when you harden the perimeter, you have to prevent a stampede effect if something does happen. One of the things we learned from our Times Square planning sessions is the bicycle racks interlock. They're very difficult to take apart if you need to open the pens and allow for a mass exodus. So one of the things that we came up with was to zip tie them together, not use the interlocking capability of the rack. And all of the alarm investigation teams and all of the other folks that were in the crowd during the ball drop carried side cutters so they could cut the zip ties if they needed to open the pens so that they could create a situation where the people could flee and not create a panic and a stampede situation. So it's a double.
Yeah, it's almost like egress out of a building, like the idea with a locked exit, you're making the
Mhm.
door or the gates unlockable easily.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think the idea of the perimeter is probably one of the most important things to start your planning with. At my town, we do a couple things with the dump trucks. We want to allow people out. We just create a serpentine so they can walk around the trucks, and that still prevents a vehicle from ramming into the crowd. Um, the other thing is we require, just like you were saying, Toph, the drivers have to stay with the trucks. We have a police officer that's in charge of each control or access point, so the drivers of those trucks know that that police officer is their boss for the night, kind of like under incident command. So obviously he has comms to the command post. He knows if something bad is going down. He'll know if an ambulance is coming out. He'll tell a driver, "Hey, pull that truck out. The ambulance is coming out." You can't ever be 100% secure, but you minimize your chances. And that's what the whole planning process is. You minimize your chances and you also maximize your ability to respond.
The other point with hardening the perimeter is you want to create standoff as well. So if you're going to have package screening or you're going to wand down the spectators that are coming to your fireworks show, make sure that's a block away. Make sure that's a distance away from the main gathering area, so that if somebody does have a device or some other uh, contents of a backpack, or you find something on them, you can interdict those people far enough away from wherever the crowd is so that they can't cause a problem.
Yeah, I think you made an interesting point before, Toph, is a show of force. We're very lucky. We have a robust police department. We get help from the state police and other local jurisdictions. There's one way in, one way out to our fireworks. It's kind of on a peninsula, and we pretty much line it with police officers. The stadies have long guns, and it's strictly a show of force. So if the bad guys are coming in, they have to walk this gauntlet, and they're going, you know what? I may not come out of here if I disrupt this place. So that show of force and that I worked for Lieutenant Colonel Jim Rice, and he said, "You know what anti-terrorism is?" I said, "What's that, sir?" He said, "It's screw your buddy." I said, "I don't understand." He goes, you make yourself the hardest target, and the bad guy goes to a softer target." And
Exactly.
that's yeah, and that's the thing I think we're talking about is you want to make yourself a hard target. You know, you want to show that you're prepared. You want to show you've got defensive capabilities. You want to show you've got offensive capabilities, and that all comes into the plan. Well, I guess that's part two. We'll talk about that later. Um,
Right. But then again, it goes back to what I was saying about what the tolerance, the pain tolerance is going to be for the people that are going to be your spectators. You know, is the community going to want to get everyone wanded down? Are they going to go through the baby strollers and the diaper bags? You know, you're going to have bag inspections, or do you just say no bags? You know, the NFL has very strict rules on the size of a back of a package that you can bring into a stadium. You know, most of the sports venues have adopted the same standards for carry-on purses, and you know, to even to that extent, a woman with a purse, you know, things like that. It all depends on your local jurisdiction and what your population is going to tolerate.
We had that. We went to an NFL game, and it was just the same way down in Jacksonville, where they had the pop-up barriers, size of bags, and everyone was checked coming through. Where we live here in the town of Newburgh, we have two parks across the street. It's a great venue for the community day, for the fireworks. We have a thing there for Halloween, for trunk or treat. The problem is that our communities around it are all neighborhoods. People will drive there, but a lot of people just walk in, and there's really not a central point to funnel people out unless you close off the entire park, which is multiple acres. How would you help control something like that where people are coming in literally from the neighborhoods through pathways through the woods,
Well,
so because they're not driving. It's just
if it's a grassy situation and you don't need to have a heavy metal barrier, it could be as simple as snow fencing. You know, that wooden lath type stuff that they use, or the orange fencing, and just stake it into the ground so that you just create control points for access and egress. You know, if somebody wants to jump over the fence or they want to cut through it, and that you really can't stop that unless you put people along the perimeter. You have law enforcement or someone along that perimeter to make sure they don't cut it and walk in except at designated locations. That could be as simple as putting fencing up.
Mhm. So you have guarded and unguarded barriers. So let's say we have that snow fence up and somebody jumps it. That's a clear sign that that guy is maybe up to no good, or that person's up to do. Maybe they're just a jerk and they're trying to get in, but that clues in the people that are looking at that. So you have a you have a they always said an unguarded barrier is not a barrier because if nobody's watching it, it's just there. So like Toph said, a guarded barrier, somebody's watching that perimeter. That's a good thing. There's a couple other interesting thoughts. Toph talked about what will your population deal with.
Tolerate.
Yeah, tolerate. So you can do random searches at the gates or at the entrance points, right? So that avoids the issue of, you see somebody that looks suspicious and law enforcement
Focus.
wants to invest that guy, focus on that guy. Yeah. You can just say it was random. Oh, we just picked you as random. It's not because you came from Mars or green. We picked you. We picked you because it was just random. We just picked you. The
Mhm.
other thing is we talked about barriers, and we'll talk more about that, I think. But um, barriers, you don't have to think of as being 100% solid. Think of them as slowing the person down. Like this guy that jumps over the barrier and then the cop runs him down. Um, and as Tove said, maybe we're getting that guy before the crowd. There's some standoff distance for your barriers. And you may want to think about barriers in depth too, a couple of different concentric barriers. So if one fails, the second, again, slows that
Yeah,
person down.
yeah. Basically, you could use it to build rings of security.
Right.
And obviously a barrier is a deterrent. If somebody's got to hop over the fence, well, if they really want to, they're going to hop over the fence or they're going to knock it down or something like that. But there again, that's where you rely on your population. If they see somebody knocking the fence down, they're going to make some notification to someone to say, hey, look, this guy's trying to get in where he's not supposed to. Maybe you should take him and have a talk with him. And there again, if all the law enforcement does is take him off the property, then you've solved the problem. Because a lot of what law enforcement does and what I was involved with when I was on the terrorism task force, a lot of times when they come out with the chapeau language that there's no credible threat to tonight's activities, that's great because if there was anything that they knew, they took those people off the street, so they weren't going to be available to enter into the location of the festivity. So basically, they're going to eliminate the problem before it becomes a problem. So if you have levels of rings of security and levels of protection, in a concentric fashion around your property, if the guy makes a mistake and he does something that somebody notices and they take him away and they even if they just detain him for the duration of the event, then he's no problem anymore because the event is over and now you cut him loose. But he's not there to cause a problem when everybody else is packed into the location on the property.
What about the idea of like kind of scary is like the lone wolf? Like we try to plan is like these big attacks. You hear them get caught. There was one they just stopped over in Germany for this past Christmas for their Christmas ceremony. It seems like a lot of these now are just individuals that are just hell bent on
Yeah,
causing chaos.
the self radicalized individuals are a challenge always, but there again, that if you have an intel capability uh, that can scan social media and things like that, then you have a leg up. A lot of times you may have to resort to use of federal partners, FBI, your bigger departments, maybe your county or your state may have an intel section where if they know there's going to be an event, depending on how big an event it is, you may be able to get some resources from them just to scan social media to find out they can put in keywords and do keyword searches across the internet and find out who's talking about a specific location or a specific event, and they can follow those people on social media and find out whether or not they're up to no good or not. There's that. There's also a thing called a SEER rating. It's a special event rating that the government has. Obviously, things like Super Bowl are a tier one event. Inaugurations a tier one. Other NASCAR events may be further down. Daytona 500 may be higher up than Talladega or something like that, where different levels of resource commitment are available from the federal and state government to assist you with your planning and provide operational support to your event during the process. So, you know, don't always think you have to go it alone. There are a lot of resources out there to help smaller departments and smaller municipalities deal with special events.
And Toph, that's a key point. This has got to be a team effort. This isn't just the fire department. This isn't just the police department. This isn't just EMS. It's bringing everybody together for that team uh, to support that, to plan for and to mitigate what we can, and then support that event if things go bad. For example, in our plan for the fireworks, if there's fire department is not needed for fire suppression, they're litter bearers for the EMS. So they know we've got a manpower to deal with casualties. Um, I think you brought up another really important point is these events, even things like the Super Bowl, the Army Navy game, the race car events you talk about, even things like the tennis matches. There is a huge planning process for all of those, and there is a huge, depending on the level of the event, like you said, people standing by, forces in place, hazmat units, fire units, police units, SWAT units. You don't see them when you're watching TV, but I can guarantee you they're there.
Well, I know they're there. I was involved with many of
They,
the many of the U.S. Open planning meetings and threat assessments and things like that. So yeah, it all plays into uh, what it is that you need to do. The other thing you have to remember is a lot of times you have trouble getting information out of law enforcement because they have an inherent need not to uh, ruin a prosecution or a criminal investigation or something like that. Unfortunately, we have to be there because we're responders. We're the ones that are going to treat the aideds and deal with the victims and things like that. So here was one kind of a story. 23rd Street, when the bomb blew up on 23rd Street, uh, one of the comments from law enforcement was the fire department showed up and opened the hydrants and to hook up the engines to the hydrants so that if they needed a line in case there was a fire, we could put the fire out. Well, yeah, we kind of washed some of the evidence down the drain. Well, if you don't help us tell us where the perimeter is, where your evidence is, and we don't have a plan for something like this, you're going to get situations where that kind of happens, where as if there was a little bit of coordination, we're not going to go rushing into your crime scene, but we're going to be able to support the fire suppression in the event thereof. So, it's, and here's the thing. They always talk about need to know. Well, we're the fire department and we have a need to know because we are going to be part of the response, whether the law enforcement guys like it or not. We're going to be there. We're going to show up with EMS and we're going to be part of this event until all of the fire life safety is our core competency. We're going to be there to take care of that. The prosecution and the evidence collection and everything else at that point is secondary to saving life. So we do need to be part of that discussion. And if that's something that a discussion you need to have with law enforcement, then it needs to be had so that the response part of it, and we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves with the threat assessment, but resource allocation and utilization is part of uh, the pre-event planning and part of your threat assessment.
it's a good time to talk about unified command. If you don't have unified command set up ahead of time, and like you said, Toph, if those parties haven't agreed to work with each other, it's not going to be a good day when things go bad. Um, a quick story. We been planning for our fireworks. Toph, you mentioned before about crowd control, and there's one way in, one way out, and it's pretty much on a peninsula. So the town supervisor said, "Geez, we're getting a lot of people in here. Or last year we had a lot of people. how do we control the crowd? And I said, Mr. Supervisor, at a certain point, we close the gate. And his answer was, that's really the people won't tolerate that, just as you said before. And I said, remember something. If things go bad, you're responsible for all those people. And he goes, we'll close the gate. And then we developed a plan at what point we were going to close the gate. But it takes, it takes somebody to be in charge of this planning. It takes teamwork. This isn't the fire department's going to do it all on their own, or EMS or fire. So this is truly a team effort, and it's a lot of fun when you get into it. And just like you said,
Oh
it's
yeah,
no different. Go ahead.
but the first time you meet that guy should not be at the incident.
Exactly.
You should be on a first name basis with all of the partners that have equity in the response to a situation long before things go boom.
Hmm. Yeah, agreed. Let's go back to the threats for a minute, Toph. How would you, um, we're going to have this fireworks thing in your town. How would you kind of rank and determine what the threats are? We talked about some of them, but can you talk about that in general, about defining the threats?
To, Basically, you have to start with what the event is. Does it have cultural, religious, ethnic uh, issues? Does that make it a target? Is it political or patriotic? Does that make it a target? Is it a date of significance? Is it an anniversary of some sort that creates a higher level of concern or a higher level of participation or a higher level of media coverage? Oftentimes, the individuals that are carrying out these attacks are looking to get their name in the paper. It's their 10 minutes or 15 minutes of fame that they're looking to profit on, to be their immortality, so to speak. So those are the types of things that you have to look at when you look at a threat assessment. How big a threat do you think this event is going to be? Will it attract people from outside your community? Oftentimes, it's not someone that's local that's going to be involved with something like this. It's going to be someone from a distance away, several towns away, several states away, possibly. But if you're New York is a prime example, the media capital of the world. People come to New York to pull to wreak havoc just because it will get media attention. If it's something in a smaller town that's not going to receive media coverage, generally speaking, they're probably not going to target it because they're just not going to get, bear the pun, bang for the buck.
What's scary is everything you mentioned that could be a reason to be there. Basically, any event that we have now, if you think about it, is either based in the nation, 4th of July, Thanksgiving parades, ceremonies, fireworks, Christmas parades, Halloween stuff. Basically, everything or any event is going to upset somebody nowadays, it sounds like, because everybody's upset about something. So basically, every event could be a target for something or someone.
But it has the potential. It has the potential, and that's what you're planning for. You actually have to plan with the worst case scenario. It's hoping for the best, but planning for the worst.
So when we do our planning for our fireworks, we plan for 10 victims, right? Of varying degrees of injuries, from a DOA to walking wounded. Um, that doesn't that doesn't cover all the bases, but it gets the process started. And then we'll talk more about this in the second segment. But that incident action plan, that's kind of a planning process for us. So when you do this planning, you have to make some assumptions. Um, and again, that's one of the assumptions. We're planning for 10 victims, say. I think the other thing that's needs to be important when you're doing your planning meetings and you're doing your threat assessments is our job's life safety. I say ours, fire, police, EMS. Life safety first up, and then like Toph, you said, evidence and stuff beyond that. So we're gonna have fireworks in our town. Let's let's kind of talk through who could be a bad guy and what could they do. Um, I'll start with the local level. There may be somebody that was fired from the town or the village or the city fire department or the public works department, and he's mad. Maybe he's got a grudge against the town, and maybe that lone wolf, like Timmy, you were saying, is gonna create some havoc. What other people could have bad intentions and I'll say want to do something bad?
Anybody could be doing something. Uh, it could be something as simple as who's the sponsors of the event. Obviously the town is the host, but are they the only sponsor, or are there other corporate sponsors? There was the situation where a gunman shot the healthcare CEO. Well, his issue was against healthcare. Well, is healthcare one of your corporate sponsors for your event? You have to take a look at it. A bank, a financial institution. It could be anything. Uh, there's a million things that you have to take a look at, and basically you have to do an assessment of each individual player in that. If their issue is it with the town, is it with the state, is it with the county? Those are levels of concern. What about VIPs? Take a look at the possibility of VIPs in your crowd and in your attendance. You're talking about your situation on the peninsula, one way in, one way out. Well, is there a way to exfil your VIPs separately from general population? Do you send the general population one way and have a separate back way exit for your VIPs so that they're not caught in any of the mayhem? You have to take a look at that. Uh, just in terms of being able to exfil them if they are the wounded.
And what's scary is we've had events here in the town before they closed, Orange County Choppers, and they were the call it the VIP, lack of a better term, and they brought their entourage with their own security, and it created chaos because the plan we had was completely altered because they didn't share what they're doing. They came in by helicopter. They're supposed to come in by ground, and there was no sharing of that information. So if there is a VIP, I guess you have to make sure that they share their egress pass, how they're going to get in, get out, and also what their staffing is like. They had a lot more staffing than we thought they would, and they wreaked havoc because they didn't share any of that information with us that were set up
Well,
for
and
it.
depending on the level of the VIP, they may have multiple vehicles that need to be parked reasonably close to wherever the VIP is, so that they can be exfilled, uh, expediently. So the idea of having a separate corridor, maybe you use one of those egress corridors for the VIP before you let people out. Those are the things that you have to coordinate, especially if it's multiple vehicles.
Yeah, Timmy, I think brings up a very critical point. Everybody has got to be written in on plan. Once you get the plan done, you've done your threat assessment, and you've got this plan done. Everybody needs to know what's going on. Minus the security issues and maybe the VIP issues, but you just can't have somebody doing what they think is the right thing. At our fireworks show we've been talking about, one of the EMS people relocated an ambulance. Well, we had a person having a heart attack, and the ambulance wasn't there. We're like, "Where the hell's the ambulance?" "Oh, I moved it over to the dock." Well, that's 15 minutes away. So once the plan is kind of the sacred thing, it's really really a deal. I was fortunate. When I worked at West Point, I was involved in 10 presidential visits. And when you have really high level VIPs like that, like Toph said, the hard car is nearby. The route, they've practiced the route in and out to get the high value target or the VIP out in or out safely. There's a bunch of other things that go on, but the plan is, you gotta have that plan in place, and everybody's got to be ready on it.
Well, the other thing too with VIPs, you have to take a look at what that does for your potential EMS response. Does the VIP go to the nearest closest hospital, and then do they go into lockdown so that they can't take any other patients? Does that change your whole routing structure for your response from EMS? Where did the wounded go if the VIP is in the nearest closest hospital?
Exactly. So you talk about first and second and third order effects. The VIP that's wounded, yeah, we'll get him out. but that may cause some other disruption. So it's the same with all your events. If whatever you're due, kind of think that through and go, okay, what does that screw up? Does that mess up something else? Um, so it's emergency planning like this is kind of fun because you war game it, and it gets
Hmm.
to be kind of fun. The other thing with the very high ranking VIPs is a lot of times their personal security detail will say, "I got them. Don't bother me. We got this squared away. You do whatever you want with that congressman, but my guy, this is what we're doing." Um,
Hmm.
so you can kind of lop off some of that stuff. Sometimes that makes it a little bit easier for you. But by the same token, you got to make sure that's not going to interfere with your plan as well. So
Right.
let's go back to threats again. So you could have both political motivations, religious motivations, financial motivations, revenge motivations. Um, it could use arson. In our case, we're talking about the fire department, right? So arson. Can you talk about arson as a terror weapon?
Well, the use of fire as a weapon goes back to ancient times. I mean, when they laid siege to castles, a lot of times they just shot flaming arrows over the wall to try to burn whatever they could. You know,
Oh, the old classic flaming arrow trick.
there you go. It's simple but effective. Molotov cocktails go a very long way.
Yeah, there you go.
Molotov cocktail might not show up as anything um, innocuous in a bag. You have a glass bottle full of a clear liquid. Even if it's not so clear, is it iced tea or is it gasoline? So those are the things that you have to be alert for if you're going to do baggage screening and things like that. They always talk about packages with stains and smells. That could be something that you might not even need a scent dog to go and do baggage screening and have them parade through the crowd. Just your nose alone may be able to detect a flammable liquid that could cause a problem in a crowd, especially once the venue starts to fill up. Once the venue fills up, the idea that somebody could do something without being seen by law enforcement, that may be something that they can hide their be a little bit more discreet about.
The one thing we're seeing in our town police department have purchased, I think it's two, maybe possibly three, high quality drones that they showed us what they're about, and they're going to, they'll support the fire service with it as needed, and they're going to start bringing them out to the events. And it's for security. They can use them. They lost person search. They got a lot of capabilities. They're a great tool. Not everyone needs one. Is that something good for planning and oversight, you think? Because there's something about being, if you think about the military, you want the high ground. You could actually be up in the air and see a lot more. Even at a fire scene, you go up in a tower ladder, it looks a lot different than the instant commander looking at the front door.
Oh, absolutely. Real time coverage during the event. Obviously, if it's a fireworks display, you have to have a good perimeter on where the fireworks are going to be shot off, so you don't shoot your drone down. But being able to get over the crowd and get a bird's eye view of what's going on. The other thing is a drone would be invaluable in to post response. Something goes bang and you want to see where people are going. uh, you know it could capture live stream video and you can see where people are going and how you can create open corridors to allow people to escape. So it's a huge deal when they're used properly.
So high and low technology. Low technology is get a map of the area that you're planning for. You throw that down on a table, and you got your partners around a table, and you can start talking this through. You can first start off with stickies, little post-its, and then refine it from there.
Put a
Eh,
clear piece of acetate over the top of it and use a grease pencil.
yeah, right. Stone Age stuff.
Everybody's everybody's got a camera on their phone. You mark it up with grease pencils on either a piece of acetate sheet
Yeah.
and take a picture of it. You can convert it to a PowerPoint slide and project it. The other thing I've seen going back to low tech is you take that picture of the map, project it on the wall on a dry erase board. Now you can mark it up on a dry erase board
Hmm.
and you can do your planning meeting that way until you get something that's a little bit more solid, a little more solid. You can brainstorm it to death on a dry erase board, just projecting
Yeah.
the map on the wall.
Yeah, having that visual in front of you, however you do it, a paper map, a projection, with the ability to write on it is is super critical during the planning process. You just got to look at it. And what's really interesting, I think, is when we do our planning, and I've been part of a lot of these different plans. You lay out your plan, you go, okay, here's what we're going to do. Yeah, and then you look at it and go, ah, damn, that's not going to work because blah blah blah. So it almost gives you an opportunity to practice it, and I guess it really does give you an opportunity to practice it, before game day, and
Yeah,
we can
well,
work out it.
the other thing I would suggest is at least you do a tabletop, bring all of the players into the room, and you present the plan, and you do a tabletop exercise based on a threat a potential threat, and do a scenario based exercise, discussion based on a scenario, and see whether or not it's going to hold up. Because some of the best corrective actions I have ever uh, made in doing some of the exercises that I've done have come in the planning process. We did one for a hospital that had a biohazard lab, and one of the things we found out was their plan was that if uh, there was an issue within the lab, they would push a button and it would unlock the doors. Well, that's great, but they didn't have a Sally port isolation area to get dressed into a proper PPE to go into the area. So basically, they were going to open the door, and whatever contamination was in the room was going to be in the hallway. So just identifying that small little piece, like, okay, unlocking the door is great because that's going to allow the responders to go in and address the issue and the injured. But now, what do you do? The whole floor becomes contaminated, and goes into another air conditioning system because the isolation lab had its own, but the hallway, the public hallway, and all of the adjacent areas were on a different system. Now they contaminated multiple floors rather than just because they opened the doors. So it led to that where you talk about the second and third order consequence, and usually it's those kinds of items that are identified from the quiet guy sitting in the corner of the room, shaking his head, saying, "Yep, that ain't gonna work."
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly. I tell you what, when you get in, you start doing this planning process, and you bring people in like your school system or the hospitals or private industry, you will be astounded by how screwed up and unprepared these people are. Some of them will be very good. Some of them you will just shake your head and go, "Are you kidding me?" We were at an exercise one day, and we asked for, and I won't say who, we asked for the emergency plan, and their plan was blah blah blah. We'll have a plan for this. That was their plan. Their plan was to have a plan that they never planned for. And I'm telling you, from my experience in just relatively suburban areas, holy crap, these people are out to lunch.
Most places don't. The only places that are having plans right now are the schools. And the only reason they have plans now is because of state laws and state funding attached to it. Because of the issue of active shooter, all schools need to have a plan for that. And if you don't have it, they restrict your funding. So the school system is the only ones that have a plan for that. And typically it's only active shooter. So it's not like how to use it for an evacuation center. When I lived in Washington, we got flooded, we wanted to use the school and they didn't know what to do.
Well, here's an interesting thing that we found out just recently. You talk about the school having a plan, and the only reason they have a plan is because they're required to have a plan. The school doesn't know how to write a plan. They,
That's true.
Right.
there's an elementary school and a middle school in my volunteer fire department's district. Both schools, their family reunification center was the firehouse. You know how we found out? The kids showed up. They never told us or asked us whether or not they could use the firehouse as a family reunification center.
Mm-hmm.
So all our guys are inside the firehouse because we were put on standby for a potential incident because they had a threat, and until they cleared the threat, the threat was made to the school district. So because there were two buildings in the in our response area, they put us on standby at the firehouse, which was great. You know, we finally got a heads up, and you know we were going to be there in case something happened. And then one of the schools decided that they were going to walk the kids down to the firehouse because it was dismissal time. The kindergarten kids walked down to the firehouse, and that was going to be the family reunification center. And all these kids showed up, and we had no idea we were in their plan. So the fact that the school has a plan doesn't mean it's coordinated with all of the people that are in the plan.
I can tell you, I won't name the district, but there's a school district that has a reunification plan for 2,000 high schoolers. They are going to walk, run, drive to the nearest elementary school that's already fully occupied. And one person from the high school is going to be responsible for reuniting 2,000 students with their parents. That same person, because she was a little nervous, decided she couldn't participate in the drill because it was too stressful. What in the hell is going to happen on game day? So when I tell you people, you'll tell you you'll be astounded at what people aren't prepared for. Mm. Mm.
Exactly.
And think about reunification. What does every kid have?
Yeah.
Go to just any incident in the fire service right now. People are calling mom and dad on the phones, and you'll have mom and dad showing up screaming because their kid got in a car accident. You can only imagine what happens at these large scale
Well,
catastrophes.
here's the other thing: if they take the phones from the kids and they can't have it in school, how do you use that?
Yeah. How do you
You know?
notify?
That's not a bad thing
Yeah.
either.
Yeah, that's a
So,
whole nother
so
second or third order consequence if the kids don't
mhm.
have their phone to be able to communicate with their parents. You know what's going to happen there with the unification or reunification.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, just because people say they got a plan, they go, well, yeah, let's show me. Okay, here, let's go. And
Hmm.
it's I think, excuse me, I think the schools are horribly unprepared, but that's just me. So let's kind of wrap this up a little bit. We talked about threat assessments, right? We talked about bad guys, potential bad guys. We talked about wargaming. Probably getting some kind of perimeter is probably an important thing. Um, Toph, any other thoughts on threat
The
assessment?
other thing I'd like to just put out on the table, um, you know, we're all in on the planning and the preparation and everything else, but uh, you may have a hard time convincing the powers to be that you need to develop some type of a plan. And if you're getting some kind of pushback from the politicians or things like that, just as you said, Mr. Supervisor, you're the one who's going to be responsible. The buck's going to stop with you if something horrible goes wrong. The You really need to take a look at, and in most cases, the possibility for deaths and injuries, as in your case, you're responsible for, Mr. Supervisor. What's going to be the economic impact to the community if something horrible goes wrong? You know, people are not going to show up, to the school afterwards. You know, if there's a horrible incident at a school, they're going to bulldoze the school, and what's going to be the loss to that? What's the economic impact of having to tear down the school, rebuild a new school? What's the emotional impact on all of the kids? What's going to be the long term care? And who's going to cover all of that in terms of dollars and cents for counseling for everyone, for all of that? What improvements are you going to have to make within your first responder community to mitigate this in the future? There's going to be a cost to having resource officers. I know the number of schools they've frowned on even hiring resource officers after shooter events, things like that. There's going to be an economic impact. What about the loss of confidence of the public in your government and your governance? Are you going to have the trust and of your community in your ability to keep them safe. Those are the things that, if you have any trouble getting people on board with the whole concept of special event planning and threat assessment and everything else, to go through this process so that you have a plan, you have a viable plan. It's a robust plan that can handle the potential of second and third order consequences. Those are the things that you need to have that sit down with the powers to be able to create this plan. The other thing is, in most cases, it's going to require some funds. You're going to have to take people out of their normal role and have them have this as a collateral duty to be part of emergency preparedness. People like to throw around OEM, Office of Emergency Management, or I'm the emergency manager for the town. Well, that's great. What do you do for emergency management? How do you manage the emergency in an interagency event that requires a multi-agency response and potentially state, local, federal, uh, things like that? So you need to use the power of persuasion if you get any kind of pushback to developing a plan and coming up with something for an event. The other thing, you take the plan, and how does it work for Fourth of July fireworks? Does that plan now work for the Christmas tree lighting in December? Things like that. You can leverage a good plan for multiple applications further on than just the special event that you have. So you may get some economy of scale by developing a good, robust plan.
That happened to us with our 4th of July. We had all our safety stuff set, and the supervisor said, "What do we do about a lost kid?" And what we learned is, Toph, just like you said, we had the system already in place. So we said the command post is going to do this, the guy on the stage is going to do that. It was already there. So we just had to add a couple lines to the plan. The command and control is there. I think it's important too to realize we need to, in Toph, to your point of uh, relying on government and having confidence in government, we need to do what's reasonable. We can't, a lot of exercises, first there's a tornado, then there's a hurricane, then there's an earthquake. Well, that's not reasonable, right? But we need to plan for what's reasonable and what you think and beyond. And I'll go one statement beyond that. A friend of mine, I forget who told me this. He goes, "Hey Jerry, if we don't plan for this, who do you think is gonna?" I'm like, you're right. And the thing that really galls me and just lights me up, I had a boss that said this. I go, well, um, we protect Tappan Zee Bridge. It's a $6 billion asset. What if a gas tanker rolls over on there? You don't really think that's going to happen, do you? I go, I didn't really think the World Trade Center was going to fall down either. But if we don't plan for these things in a reasonable way, right? Who's gonna? Who's gonna?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you going back to the Trade Center, the idea, the McKinsey report said it was a lack of imagination on the part of the planners to not plan for using planes as weapons. Well, the Japanese did it in the 40s. They were using planes as weapons. The kamikazes were dive bombing U.S. ships in the Pacific Ocean. So it wasn't much of a stretch to say that somebody could get their hands on a plane and fly it into a building. If you can fly one into a ship in the water, you can fly one into a big building that's taller than anything else around it. It's not a hard target to find. So, on some level, yes, you have to be within the realm of possibilities, but you also have to be in the realm of reality.
And
Is it
sometimes,
possible?
sometimes out of the realm of reality.
Yeah, no, and that
Yeah.
that goes back to the whole discussion about whether or not it's reasonable or not. You still have to be able to prepare for it. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I think we're coming up on an hour. I think that pretty much wraps up part one and threat assessments. We'll go over this a little bit. If anything we missed, we'll do in part two, writing the incident action plan. Toph, do you want to introduce the incident action plan quick to kind of give us a view of what's coming next?
yeah, when we talked about the incident action plan, we're developing the plan for how this whole thing is going to go down. There are forms and documents that are available online so that you can prepare it. So it's a standard form. Everybody who's used to doing special event planning uses them. It gives you an opportunity to do something in a structured manner. So once you do the threat assessment, you can apply everything into your ops plan and to your the threat assessment. uh, what we want you to do is we want you to think of everything and put in what you can reasonably expect. We talked about developing an operational plan. Weather may be a consideration when you've developed the op plan. Obviously, it's not necessarily part of a threat assessment, but if the weather is 95 degrees or it's 32 degrees, if your Christmas tree lighting is going to be frigid, or your 4th of July fireworks are going to be 90 degrees and not 70 degrees, that's going to affect your op plan. So
we had this
those are the
past
things.
summer with our fireworks in the town of Newburgh, but we had a thunder shower come through and it flooded out the fireworks stuff. And inclement weather is probably one of the biggest threats to any event in any town. A sudden thunder shower, very hot or very cold, will have a greater risk of injury to the public than anything else. I mean, that's something to really think about.
Well, one of the things that I did when I was doing the Macy's 4th of July fireworks planning and part of the threat assessment was I took all of the information from past years from EMS. I got all of the aided responses for every year and I plotted it against the temperature and humidity. And we got it pretty close so that we could tell, depending on what the forecast was, what the predicted number of aided cases we were going to have. And I was always within a handful, depending on the temperature and the humidity. The other thing that you have to remember is that if you have all of these aided cases that you have to treat as a general issue within your special event, that eliminates those resources from your contingent group that are going to respond in case something terrible happens. So if you only have 5 ambulances assigned and they're all hauling patients that are just come down with heat stroke off to the hospital and there's no ambulances on scene, well, then you don't have 5 ambulances available for emergency response if something happens. So resource allocation becomes a key part of your op plan.
Cool. Well, I think we want to wrap it up. We've lost Tim's video. Tim, any last comments before we close out for today?
Yeah, I apologize. My video went down for some reason, but the audio stayed up. First, thank Toe for being here. He's been a great friend for years and one of those people, and honestly, a mentor to me and helping me out with everything with fire engineering over the years, and a real smart guy for this. Probably the most important thing is what's scary is you can be in small town USA, and even not the terrorism, bad things can happen, and if you're not ready for them, it will make news that you don't want to be in. So a little bit of forethought, and we're going to do 2 more of these to cover this. And it doesn't take a lot of effort to be planned. It just, if a lot of people work together, you break it down. And as Chris said, you can reuse a plan over and over again and just adjust it for times of year or and location. So I think it's important that people think about it, because if you look at the news today, things are happening more and more, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, Toph, we'll give you one more last shot real quick, and we'll wrap it up.
No, I think we did great. I just hope this is helpful to those folks that are out there that need to write a plan, need to execute a plan, and need to follow up. Stay tuned for part 2 and part 3. We'll be discussing the after action review, and we'll discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how you write an improvement plan and move on and move forward.
Do it better the next time.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Thank you very much to our listeners. Thank you. Don't forget Tim and Toph. Hang on here for after we stop recording. Y'all be safe. Look forward to seeing you at the FDIC 2026 in Indianapolis. It'll be a world record show, I'm sure. And for now, we'll